This video is brought to you by Squarespace.
Well, I'm here with John, and we did a wonderful tour of his bonsai collection, and now we're just going to go over general bonsai care tips. So where should we even begin? If I'm like a newbie in the bonsai world, where do I start?
The best place to start for assured success would be to go to a place where they deal with bonsai regularly. You can get them in malls, you can get them at a lot of different nurseries, but if you go to a regular bonsai nursery where they're familiar, they can give you all the information you would need. They're not that hard to take care of, but there are some differences. And they're not like your typical houseplant.
And why is that?
Because they're in different soil, for one thing. Our plants during the summer and growing season, our plants are outside the entire time. It's very important. The temperate species, those that grow normally in the north, they have to be outside in the summer, and then in the winter when it's cold, they need to be dormant. So we bring them into an area that's unheated so that they aren't too cold, but they're not too warm either. And too warm is the important one.
Right.
I like to keep my trees below 42 Fahrenheit, above 26 Fahrenheit.
Got it.
So they can freeze, and that's okay. They will drop their leaves if they're a deciduous tree. They will have changed color in the fall. They go through the normal biological processes.
So I guess what you're saying is make sure you know what type of species you have, because some people who might see a houseplant, for instance, they might not know exactly what it is. It's always nice knowing what it is so you can understand its care. But with bonsai, you should really actually know what your plant is and if it is a temperate species or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And wherever you buy it, if you buy it from a mall, you're probably not going to know. You might get a common name, and that probably will help, but from a nursery, they should know exactly what it is. Also keep in mind cultivars. In other words, you're not getting something that would have grown in the native environment, but like Japanese maples, there are over 250 different cultivars.
So a cultivated variety that was done by a human, selected by a human.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. Okay. There are many different varieties of apples.
Right.
But the same idea.
Yeah.
A cultivar will have maybe a little different requirements. It may be more delicate, may not be as cold tolerant. It may need more fertilizer. It may need a little more TLC. So you want to know, is this a cultivar when you buy it? So that you're avoiding any issues.
Yeah. And what really are you looking for as far as buying something? Because if you're buying something out of the bag and you're saying, okay, it's always going to look this way, that's not true, right? You have to care for it and shape it and keep it kempt, I guess, over time.
Right. For it to be a bonsai, it has to be in a pot. And then it does get trimmed. That's essential.
And trimmed on top and trimmed on the bottom in the roots?
You would trim where it needs to be trimmed.
Okay.
Maybe the bottom branches are skinny and they're not they're not long enough, or they're not what you want, so you might let those grow longer and trim only the top. It would depend on where you're going with the design. So this is an artistic endeavor as well as horticulture. So you're both trying to keep the tree alive. If it's not alive and growing, it's not going to make it. It's dead, obviously. So what you want to do is to keep it alive, and as it grows, you can manipulate where it goes and how it goes.
Right. And what are you trying to manipulate and look for? I mean, when I look at your bonsais, I see, oh my gosh, the beautiful structure and the trunks and the stems of the trees.
Right.
What are you really selecting or looking for as an artist and a horticulturist?
The overall goal in bonsai is to produce a tree that is aesthetically beautiful, that looks like an old tree. It's got character. I call it character. And it means that a nice big fat trunk, taper up to the top, branches with tiny leaves. All these things are the characteristics of mature trees, and that's where we're going. So you both want to keep it going, growing and all, but you want to keep the idea of the art of the visual part as a major component.
Yeah. Well, I want to allow for your way of caring for a bonsai, but you had already mentioned planter or pot and substrate. So do you want to go through that and what you're selecting for?
Sure. Again, bonsai is only a bonsai if it's in a pot. Our pots are not just any old pot will do. Obviously, you need good drainage, and I'll explain why in the future. But typically, a bonsai pot has good drainage holes in it. This is a fairly large pot, at least compared to what this tree would need, that is rather thick. It is highly fired, so that even when it freezes, it's not going to break down.
Right, so a high fire, like a lot of those low fire ceramics, they just basically break apart even in the summer months. They just start to crumble, really.
The terracotta pots that people often have things in there, I like the look of them, but they will not last.
Right.
So you want to get, also, they usually have feet, because what that does is it keeps the pot up above the substrate and allows for better drainage.
Right. And probably a little bit of airflow somewhat underneath,
Airflow is crucial. Oftentimes we put a substrate in the pot that is very coarse, and the whole idea is to allow oxygen up into the root mass, because the roots need oxygen. That was something that I didn't learn until I was well into my adulthood. Then the soil that we use is not what you would get at the typical nursery.
It's almost like better to call it substrate, because you have this idea when I hear soil, I almost think of this brown, dirty, or peaty kind of mix, and it's not that. It's this rocky kind of like substrate, right?
It can be very rocky,
but lightweight.
Lightweight when it's dry. It does make a difference. But what this particular soil that I like to use has got pumice, lava, a little bit of pine bark, and akadama, which is a Japanese material, which is a clay soil that is a little hard to get a hold of. But there's not much organic material in here. So the trees' roots love this. There is a drawback to it, though. As you can imagine, since it is so loose and airy, the water just rushes right through.
Right.
When we water, the water rushes right through, so we have to water more often. On a hot summer's day, you might water actually twice on a day really hot.
I'm feeling like this might be a day where you're watering twice.
Typically, you would water once a day. In the winter, you might water every 2, 3, 4 weeks, depending on your setting for your plants.
Right.
And we have a variety of tools that are bonsai tools specifically made to help you trim and organize your tree.
Well, let's go through each one, because some of these I'm unfamiliar with.
Okay.
They look like really insane dental tools.
Oh, okay.
for a big tusked animal.
Well, just plain old scissors. You try to keep them really sharp so that you can go in and do minor trimming and all on small things.
And when I think of those, I think like a traditional Japanese.
Right.
They have like the longer
and
handle.
you can pay big bucks or not very big bucks. You don't need, especially getting started, you don't need to go out and spend a lot of money initially. Things can be reasonably inexpensive to start with until you know what you want. Then these are called concave root pruners, but they also are used on the branches, and they are great for a little thicker branches and all.
They look like they cut at an angle almost.
Yes, they do. And you want to keep them nice and sharp, so when you do cut a branch or an area of the tree, you want it to be a clean cut.
How are you sharpening them?
I sharpen them by hand.
Oh,
I have a
wow.
little files that I do. A lot of people just take it somewhere and ask someone that knows how to do these things to sharpen it for them.
It's almost better to learn yourself, though, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
You're
and
going
it's
to be
easy.
working on them daily.
It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Then these are also pruners that are designed to give you a deep cut, a deeper cut, and a rounded cut. This would not be the first thing I would buy. I would get a pair of these first, and then once you got into bonsai a little more, you'll find that these are quite helpful and useful.
It's like an ice scooping
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah. And then you're going to need wire cutters. And if you get bonsai wire cutters, these will go right up to the trunk and allow you to cut wires from your tree. They work really well.
And why are you using wires?
Okay.
Yeah.
We use wires to move the branches in the direction we want. We want them in aesthetically pleasing positions.
And are you using a specific kind of wire that doesn't cut into the branch, I would imagine?
They all cut into the branch.
Okay.
And that is always an issue. You can either use copper or aluminum. Copper is better, but it's harder to work with. We anneal it so it softens it, so that we can wrap it around the branches and the trunks if we need it. But it thinner, since it's stronger, you don't need as thick a wire as aluminum. Aluminum is easier to use. I tend to use aluminum more often.
Well, can't you
than
get
copper.
wires with like a, some kind of coating on the outside, or like something that's padded on the outside, or is that not?
I don't know of anybody that does that.
Okay.
That would probably help a little bit.
Yeah.
What you have to do is when you wire a branch, you leave it, everyone says, well, how long can I leave it on? Or should I leave it on? You leave it on until the branch is set.
Yeah, it's like a cast on your arm.
Or either the branch is set where you placed it, or it's starting to bite in. And once it starts to bite in, you have to remove it, and then you can put a new wire on if you're doing that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to interject, but you had one more tool that I am curious what it is.
This is a root hook, and we use this, we repot our trees periodically. The roots go gangbusters in this soil, and they really do well. We're looking for fine roots, not heavy, thick roots, fine roots that have got good root hairs to absorb nutrients and moisture. But then when we take them out for repotting, this helps us rake out the old soil, get the roots all spread out and all. We trim the roots, and then we put them back into a pot again. You
had mentioned at one point that roots that you're pruning maybe every 2 to 3 years. So is that when you're actually trading out the soil as well, or the substrate as well?
Yes.
Or do you top up? I'm imagining that you top up the substrate too if it gets like knocked off in the wind or the...
Sure, we can always top it up.
Yeah.
But usually when we repot a tree, we use new soil. On many trees, especially the conifers, we never bare root. You always leave some of the soil on the tree. And this is especially true when you're dealing with collected trees. You bring them out of the wild, you place them in a pot, and you need to leave some because of the microorganisms that are there, and the fact that if you bare root a conifer, oftentimes that's a dead end. Okay, so it helps in transplanting from one place to another, essentially. Yes. That's really good to know. And can you add a mycorrhizal mix to it, or is it the fact that that's not, wise to do because you don't know what kind of mycorrhizae are in there? Because mycorrhizae, they're different species, the best way to ensure that you have the right mycorrhizal relationship with your plant is to go out and either collect under trees in the wild soil from that, so you're likely to get the mycorrhizae, or get it from a tree in a pot that's already got it, and you can take a little of that and put it with your tree. It's kind of like starting compost, or your like sourdough starter or something like that. Now a lot of people would say, well, you don't need mycorrhizae. Because you're giving them all the nutrients they need, you're giving them all the water they need. Why would you do it? We're always trying to be as healthful for the tree as possible. Every way we are, we try to make sure that if it's a little healthier, if I do this, I'll do it.
So now you had mentioned as this is being, you plant this in your pot and you have the roots and the trunk and everything, you have your substrate. When you water, how are you watering? You say
Okay.
you water regularly on
Okay.
a daily basis maybe.
Yes.
You know, am I looking for a little bit of water trickling out? Am I doing a rain shower on this puppy?
We're not doing a rain shower. We're not doing a little water trickling out. We are flooding the pot. And that sounds counterintuitive. But remember, we're back to this soil again. And you're trying to get this soil to absorb as much moisture from the water you've just given it as possible. So I have a wand and I flood the pot, and you want to make sure that you not just water in the front, you water all the way around on the soil till you know water is coming out the bottom,
Right.
rolling out the bottom.
Right. And then I'm imagining if you're watering so thoroughly, eventually the nutrients or the fertilizer that you're giving it is going out with that water.
Exactly.
So how regularly are you, in general, you know, fertilizing your plants during the growing season?
Especially if you've got plants that are really growing well, 2 to 3 weeks, you might give them some fertilizer.
And is it something like a well-balanced? Are you giving it like a bone meal, or, you know, what's advisable?
You can get all caught up in all the goodies that you want to add. Think about NPK. I would start out with a chemical fertilizer, just with a basic
synthetic
20-20-20 maybe.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
And then as you get more into it and talk with other bonsai artists, there are ways to do organic fertilizer, which I like, because that encourages the microorganisms. If you've got microorganisms living in here, they help the plant.
Well, one of the things that you're trying to almost like mimic and help the plant as much as possible. When I think of, especially in these forests, if we look out at your forest here, you see a ton of leaf litter and bark and plants. But do we see that in most bonsais here? Like, should you leave, if there's leaves like dropping, should we leave leaf litter on there, or should it be a little bit more kempt, in your opinion?
Well, we tend to be a little more kempt, I would have to admit.
Yeah.
But things can happen to a tree. Sometimes we take lemons, problems with a tree, a dead branch, or a hole in the side of the trunk, or some aspect that we don't like, and we turn it into lemonade.
Yeah. And make it
that's the
part
artist.
of the character.
That's the artist in the whole process.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that we need to know about our general care? I mean, I feel like we've accomplished a lot here, but is there anything else?
Yes. They are susceptible to pests, to insects, and to fungus. Fungal issues. And I try to be as organic as possible. I don't do a lot with pesticides. If you've got caterpillars on there, you pick them off. There are some insects, like scale insects, that you just can't really pick them off. And so you've got other issues. So I try to be as organic as I can. But you do have to realize when your trees are out here, they are susceptible. But at the same time, when they're outdoors, there are predators on the problem insects you may have.
Right, exactly. And when I think about, sometimes if I have like mealybugs or pest pressure on my houseplants inside, if it's warm enough during the spring in a shaded area, I'll bring them out, and the beneficial insects will go and do their magic. So by the time I take that houseplant in again, it's like it's healed in a way. So these are really solid tips. Scale, I empathize with you. It could be so much of a problem. But what I like about bonsai too is that when you're displaying them, they usually are in their own space. So it's really hard for maybe one pest to transfer to the other, especially if they're like something like a scale.
True.
Yeah.
And the way I have displayed these, this is not a wonderful way to display them. Some of my friends, they've got special posts that they put them on in their yard, and they've got all these ways of displaying them really beautifully. And I haven't done that. But you can get carried away with how you want to display your trees to give them their best shot.
Right. Well, thank you so much. This is really helpful. And I hope a lot of people actually get inspired and do a gateway drug through bonsais. And thank you so much.
It's wonderful. You'll never stop enjoying it once you get started. I guarantee it.
I will back up that guarantee.
Yeah, plants are marvelous.
Now, if you visited any of my sites, including homesteadbrooklyn.com, houseplantmasterclass.com, summerrain.net, or even our newest site at flockfingerlakes.com, then you'll know the slick design and the easy-to-use interfaces are complements of Squarespace. Now, the first thing you'll notice about them is that they just have really nice modern design templates. And there's quite a selection to choose from. And I've even used different templates for all of my sites just to give them a different look. And you could easily customize them to make it even more different if you want. Plus, Squarespace is this all-in-one platform, so they have these easy integrations and they could offer solutions for everything from your social integrations to email marketing to setting up your shops online, which I use for both homesteadbrooklyn.com and flockfingerlakes.com. If you have any questions whatsoever, they have some of the best customer support as well. So I encourage you to give them a try, especially if you're looking to build your own website or upgrade a pre-existing one. You could just use my link, squarespace.com/summerrain, for 10% off your purchase.